Lately, I've been posting, on Sunday, like what I read this week. So I decided to just do a quick video on what I read this week because I think some books need to be expanded on, or sometimes people are like me, they're nerds and may want to like know more about the books than just the picture. I mean, you may have seen the book, but you may have never heard the book and want to know more about the book. So maybe somebody will see a copy and say, hey, looks kind of interesting. Maybe I'll try that out. So this is what we're doing here. Okay, the first book I want to talk about is Runoff by Tom Manning. Now, Tom Manning is a cartoonist that I got introduced to through Colin Blanchett, who has an interview with Tom on his channel. He's talked about Tom at length. Tom, this was published, I think, originally in the early 2000s. And yeah, this copy's falling apart a little bit, but I got a great deal on it, and through A-Books, but I can fix this with some glue. And this is actually a library copy, and this came from the Moose Jaw Public Library, which is like 100 kilometers southwest of Saskatoon. So how it ended up in my hands is a strange odyssey, but he makes really unique graphic novels. He's a good artist. This is probably, I think, his second graphic novel. I have his follow-up, Eric, that came out in the late teens, and then followed with Bering Strait, which came out like in 2021, I believe, 2022. All these books are excellent. Tom Manning's a person that nobody talks about. Everybody should talk about this guy. Just a really good artist. His art is being repped through Athenaeum comic art, and he's just really talented. His stories are unlike any other story. Basically, this story starts off in a town in Washington State. This guy is driving through as a trucker, visiting his brother, and he finds he can't leave. And then all of a sudden you start finding out a lot of other people can't leave. And everybody that comes in there to say, hey, we were trying to reach these people, they can't leave. And this story, I'm not going to try to explain it because it's, when you read it, it makes sense. But if I try to explain it to you, there's just so much and it's so sweeping that I couldn't do it justice. But basically, the residents there realize that they are unable to escape. There are dealings with supernatural creatures, ghosts. There's odd humor in here. One thing that he does really well, and I'm going to try to find a quick example of it, is that once in a while he throws these Doonesbury-esque type of panels. And if none of you know what Doonesbury is, then I feel really old, but it was a famous comic strip from the 60s to the 80s by Gary Trudeau. It was carried in all the comics, comic newspapers, all the comic sections of the newspaper. And he uses it to effect, to inject humor, but there's also suspense, there's horror, and then you read this and it's about 450 pages. But it's well written, it's paced properly, the dialogue makes sense. And then when you get towards the end, I would say the last couple of chapters, when you actually start realizing what's happening, you're like, oh crap, and some of the things that were used, like some of the panels, the way they were done, like this is what I mean by the Doonesbury type of work, where when you would see this, a lot of the stuff was done for humor and gags, but then later on it's done effectively to convey a real sense of horror and dread. Just really brilliant stuff. You can find this on eBay, you can find this on A-Books. I would highly recommend reading any of his books. I think he only has 4 graphic novels. His first one, Race Car, I think was limited to 100 copies, so it's impossible to find. There was Runoff, there's Eric, and then there's a Bering Strait. They've all been excellent. So I was really happy to finally read this. Took a while because there's just so much there, but it was never boring, it was never tedious. Next, what I finished reading, was Die With Your Mask On, which is the new comic from the brain trust of Canon magazine, which is Colin Blanche and Alex Eklund. This is like Canon, but featuring superheroes, but not current superhero topics. I mean, it could, but it's not really focused on the Chip Zdarsky Batman run, or whether or not Zeb Wells is a good writer for Spider-Man, which he's not, but he's on that book forever. This is really based on just anything that's superhero related by the same people that contribute to canon. So you're not going to get those kind of like stories. You're going to the first part of this issue 1, features a long, interesting interview with Rick Veitch. Rick Veitch is a guy who's been in the game decades, 4 decades, a little bit more than 4 decades, 4+, and just really has an interesting take on comics and doing the deconstruction of the superhero. There's a reading list of Rick Veitch put together by Colin. There's some articles related to his, I guess you would call it his universe where he's building, the Max Immortal kind of universe. And then there's some other articles relating to superhero stories, or superhero-related sorts of stories. I have an article, just full disclosure, I contribute to the magazine. I have an article coming out in issue 2, so Colin was nice enough to comp me, but I really enjoyed reading this. I think this is, it's kind of interesting because I haven't really read superheroes in a few years and don't really miss it. But when you read this, you kind of think, yeah, you know, there's a lot you can do there, but for various reasons, they don't push that envelope. But I recommend this, same place you can get it. Canon, I think, loading the Canon on their big cartel has this on sale for $8. To me, worth the money. Next, I read The Lagoon by Lilli Carré. This is a 2008 graphic novel, and I got this at MegaCon. And it's funny because I guess it's like a press release version, because this is like the press release for it, and it was tucked into the book. So I never read it. It's an interesting book. The art, you could tell, seems very influenced by Black Hole by Burns. I found this, after a while, I was like, well, what are we talking about here? But then later on, more and more, I got into the story. I thought it was really interesting. But then the ending was rather abrupt and kind of unfinished. So it's kind of like open as to like what happened at the end. And if this would have had an ending, I'd probably say, hey man, this is an awesome graphic novel. But to me, this is more like, this could have been an awesome graphic novel, but I don't know how it ended. But the art's great. I'm looking forward to reading more of her work. The last book I finished reading this past week is I.L. This is by Osamu Tezuka. This is a translation for the first time in English. This was published by Titan Books. And this is a series that Tezuka did and started serializing in 1969. I think it ended in 1970. And it's a kind of a weird story in that basically what you think is the main protagonist is this failed film director who seems like he's out of touch with the type of movies that younger audiences want. He meets this guy, Count Alucard, which is Dracula spelled backwards. And he's like, hey, you know, you can be like making living movies or movies in reality or whatever. So he gives them this coffin with this person, and if they go into the coffin, they can kind of like mimic anyone. So what you end up getting is this kind of clunky setup where this director hires people. How he's doing like living cinema or something, I don't know, but he's basically an agency where people hire them, and they hire someone that can imitate how they look for various reasons. So these are all one chapter, one and done stories. And the first half of the book, I mean, it's not bad. You know, some of it, is the whole setup is a little strange, but you know, some of them have like Twilight Zone endings, some of them have Justice is Served endings. It seems very much focused on not kids, but I think it's focused at older teenagers or young adults, but it still seems like it's still more kid friendly, but not like Astro Boy. And it's funny because Tezuka talks about in the intro how, or talks about in the book where he says that he really can't draw women very well. And IL is this creature that we don't know if she's like I think she's like a supernatural being that can kind of convert herself, but none of this, lots of it isn't explained. She's related to Count Alucard. I think she's his niece or something. And so, anyway, the first half of the book are these kinds of stories, not super lighthearted, but not super dark and serious. And then about 60% of the way in, there's book 2. And then book 2 goes really dark. Like, there's books on revenge for having dealt with sexual violence. A guy who is creating erotic films because he has sexual dysfunctions. Just really dark subjects. It's really kind of interesting. It's almost like it's a very big tonal shift. And he also does a lot of these in his stories. He does starts doing a lot of that pacing element thing that he started doing in the early 70s, where all of a sudden in this second series, you just start seeing these quiet scenes, kind of setting up stuff. So it's almost like not like say two books, but I can tell you season 1 is, I think he's trying to find his footing. Season 2, he decided to go very dark. But the art gets better too. He started like, I think, challenging himself. And it's all, the entire series is here. I don't think there's no parts, other parts to it. I'm always happy to see Tezuka translated in English, new Tezuka that we've never read before in English. So if you're a Tezuka fan, I would definitely look at it. If you're a fan of his, like I'm a fan of his adult style, the work they started doing in the 70s into the early 80s. I really like that work. So this is, you can kind of see like almost a change in style from around 1969, 1970, where all of a sudden you start seeing this darker, grittier style they came up with, which I find really interesting. So that's what I read. It was a good group of books. I really enjoyed it. And I think I've been pretty lucky with all the books I've gotten so far. And Die With Your Mask On, I think I mentioned already, but if I haven't, I'll say it again, has us on stuff for $8. Runoff you can find on eBay, and you can find this on A-Books. It's not terribly expensive. I'm just trying to find the first print run, I think, of the late 90s and hardcover or the signed comics. Those can get kind of pricey, but if you're looking for this is not expensive at all. Unique comics. This was pretty good, except for the ending, and this I liked a lot. That's really it. Thanks.